My name is Adelaide Carter. Most people just call me Addie. I'm 65 years old, a retired literature teacher from Savannah, Georgia. I used to think I understood every story, the rise, the fall, the redemption, but nothing prepares you when your own story turns on you. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me say this. Sometimes the quietest people rewrite the ending without raising their voice. If you believe dignity still matters, stay with me. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, quiet, and true, don't forget to follow this channel. It was an ordinary Sunday dinner, the kind where the air smells of rosemary and roasted chicken. My son, Brian, sat across from me, his fork tapping against his plate like a metronome of impatience. His wife, Claire, was scrolling through her phone, smiling at something that wasn't any of us. Lily, my granddaughter, kept her eyes low, her fork moving tiny circles in mashed potatoes. The twins, Noah and Owen, were laughing about a game, unaware of the silence tightening around the table. Brian leaned back in his chair, that half smile, the one he inherited from his father, forming on his face. "You'll watch the kids for free, right, Mom? That's what family means." His tone wasn't a question. It was a declaration, the kind that hangs in the air and dares you to disagree. For a second, no one breathed. The sound of the kettle whistling in the kitchen filled the gap his words left. Claire looked up, pretending to fix her napkin, as if waiting to see if I'd object. I didn't. I smiled. The kind of smile that looks polite from the outside, but feels like a closing door from the inside. "Perfect," I said softly, setting my glass down. "That's exactly what family means." Brian grinned, thinking he'd won something. The twins cheered for dessert. Lily glanced up, her eyes questioning, maybe even afraid. I gave her the smallest nod. The dinner went on, filled with clinking silverware and hollow laughter. Later, after the dishes were stacked and the house quieted, I stood by the kitchen window. The rosemary plant I had brought from my old cottage caught the porch light. My husband Jacob used to say, "That herb's tougher than people think." I smiled again, but this time it wasn't for anyone, just for me. The next morning, the world was still gray when I walked into the First Savannah Bank. The carpet smelled faintly of lemon polish. The clerk recognized me from years of paying school charity checks. I told her I needed to update an account. She asked for my ID and slid the forms across the desk. My hands didn't shake, not even once. Brian's name was right there, joint holder. I traced the ink, thinking about the years I had trusted him to handle my finances after Jacob died. How easily I had believed in his good intentions. I signed once, then again. The pen made a soft scratching sound, steady and sure. The clerk looked up. "Would you like me to notify the other party?" "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "He'll notice soon enough." When I stepped outside, the morning sunlight hit the glass door, and I caught my reflection. Calm, composed. The same face that had smiled at dinner. The same woman everyone thought would never fight back. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't fighting. I was reclaiming. As I walked to my car, a text came through. Reed Hollis, an old friend of Jacob's, now an attorney, had replied to the message I sent the night before. "Understood," he wrote. "We'll proceed quietly." I saved his number under a new contact name, Guardian. I drove home with the windows slightly open. The smell of rain on pavement mixed with rosemary from the plant sitting on the passenger seat. It felt like an answer to something I hadn't asked yet. When I got back, the twins were in the yard, tossing a ball. Brian's car was gone. Claire's laughter floated faintly from inside. I stood there for a while, watching the children. Lily came out, carrying her sketchbook. She hesitated before speaking. Grandma, you're not mad, are you? I smiled at her. No, sweetheart. Sometimes love just needs boundaries. She didn't understand, not fully, but she nodded like she wanted to. I brushed a strand of hair from her face and handed her a small branch of rosemary. For your art, I said. It reminds you to grow back, even after the frost. That evening, Brian called. His tone was bright, careless. Hey, Mom, thanks again for helping out with the kids. We really appreciate it. Of course, I said. Family means helping, doesn't it? He chuckled, not catching the echo. When the call ended, I looked at the clock. 9:42 p.m. The day had folded itself neatly. The same day I stopped being the free labor he expected and started being the woman he never saw coming. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook before turning out the light. He thought I smiled for him. I smiled for myself. When I first sold my cottage, I told myself it was temporary. $62,500 wasn't much, but it was enough to help my son get back on his feet after his business failed. The cottage had been small, wrapped in ivy, smelling of salt from the nearby marsh. I sold it because Brian said he needed a chance to rebuild. It's just until things stabilize, Mom, he'd said. I believed him. Every mother wants to believe. The first few weeks in their house felt almost comforting. The twins left their shoes by the door. Lily helped me unpack my books. Claire welcomed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, offering coffee in a spotless mug. She called me Mom in that practiced tone, polite but distant. I told myself it was nerves, adjustment, nothing more. At first, they insisted on helping. Brian carried my boxes. Claire asked about my old students. The house felt alive with laughter, the kind that covers up cracks. But weeks turned into months, and the warmth thinned. What started as gratitude became assumption. They stopped saying thank you. I became part of the furniture, useful, silent, always there. Morning routines settled like clockwork. I packed lunches, folded laundry, kept the kettle warm. Claire began leaving sticky notes. Kids' dentist, 2 p.m. Don't forget soccer. Brian started spending longer hours at meetings. The refrigerator door became my calendar, my life reduced to magnets and instructions. One evening, I found a hotel tag on the laundry pile. Miami. My hands paused mid-fold. That week, they'd said they were visiting Brian's investors in Atlanta. The next day, while scrolling through my phone, I saw Claire's smiling face on social media. A beach in the background. Champagne. Hashtags about gratitude and family blessings. I didn't react. I just studied the screen until it dimmed. Behind me, the kettle began to whistle softly, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. That night, when they returned, Claire hugged me at the door, the scent of sea salt clinging to her hair. We missed the kids so much, she said lightly. I nodded. Her wrist sparkled with a bracelet I hadn't seen before. Silver, engraved, expensive. I said nothing. Silence, I was learning, lasted longer than arguments. The days began to blend. The children's laughter was still bright, but something in Lily's eyes changed. She stopped asking her parents for help with homework and started sitting beside me sketching. Sometimes she'd draw the rosemary plant from the kitchen window. It looks like it's still breathing, she said once. I smiled and replied, that's what strong things do. One afternoon, as I set the table for dinner, Rosa from across the street waved from her porch. She was friendly, retired, always curious. Your son and his wife sure travel a lot, she called with a grin. I laughed politely, though my chest tightened. They work hard, I said. She nodded, still watching. Her glance lingered a second too long. That night, while washing dishes, I looked out the window. Their suitcases were lined up by the garage door again, waiting. The pattern was unmistakable. Trips, smiles, promises, excuses. I began to count the days they were gone. 12 days out of 30. I stopped counting after that. The following week, Brian handed me a printed schedule. "We've got a lot going on this month," he said. "Claire's got some real estate clients, and I'm finalizing a few contracts. We'll need you to pick up the kids more often." His voice was gentle, practiced. "You love spending time with them, right?" "I do," I said, placing the schedule neatly on the counter. Love should never feel like an obligation. He blinked, confused by my tone, then shrugged. "You're the best, Mom." When he left the room, I stared at the calendar. Each red mark was a day they would be gone. The lines looked like cuts. I felt a quiet shift inside me, something small, like the first crack in ice. That weekend, while they packed for another conference, I went into the guest room, the one that used to be mine before they filled it with boxes. My books were stacked beneath old holiday decorations. The photo of Jacob, my late husband, was pushed behind a broken lamp. I dusted it off and whispered, "You'd laugh at this, wouldn't you?" His smile in the picture seemed to answer. He always believed that truth found its way out eventually, like sunlight under a closed door. Later that night, as the house emptied again, I made tea and sat by the window. Lily's light was still on. I watched her paint until her brush slowed. She looked tired, older than 16. I wondered what she knew, what she'd overheard. When she finally looked up, our eyes met through the glass. She gave me a small, knowing smile. I nodded, promising something silently, something she couldn't name but would someday understand. In that moment, I realized the line between helping and being used isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, invisible, and it slips in while you're folding someone else's clothes. The next morning, I took out my notebook and wrote a single line beneath the one from the first night. Every story begins with good intentions. It's the ending that decides who we really are. The first hint came from Lily. It was a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where light feels tired. She stood at my bedroom door, clutching her phone. "Grandma," she whispered, "I think you need to see something." Her voice was trembling, caught between fear and loyalty. I motioned her in and closed the door behind her. On the screen were messages, private ones between Brian and Claire. The chat was titled Mom Plan. The words sat there, cold and unashamed. "Once she sells the cottage, we'll use part of it to pay off the credit line. Get her to sign power of attorney when she's settled. Tell her it's just for security." I read slowly, every word slicing through the trust I had built across decades of motherhood. Lily sat beside me, silent. She didn't have to say anything. The truth was written in blue bubbles and timestamps. I took the phone gently, capturing every screenshot. My hands were steady, my mind oddly calm. There's a strange peace in seeing the shape of betrayal. It gives pain a face. When I reached the last message, Claire's name appeared again. "We'll tell her it's an investment. She won't question us." I stared at that line for a long moment. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were inching closer. I thought of my husband, Jacob, his old watch, his quiet laugh when people underestimated kindness. He used to say, "Never confuse silence with surrender." I thanked Lily softly, kissed her forehead, and told her to delete the chat. Keep this between us. For now, I said. She nodded, eyes glistening. When she left, I sat there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the house. It no longer sounded like home. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small cream envelope. It was the same kind I used for letters years ago. I slipped the printed screenshots inside and sealed it carefully. Then I dialed Reed Hollis. His voice came through the line, calm as ever. Addie, I've been expecting your call. I need advice, I said quietly. Legal advice. He didn't ask questions right away. He knew me too well. Start from the beginning, he said. I told him about the messages, the account, the lies about work trips. I told him about Brian's debts, the bracelet, the schedule taped to my refrigerator. Reed listened without interruption, the kind of silence that holds weight instead of emptiness. When I finished, he said, We'll handle this carefully. Gather more evidence. Keep records of everything. I'll refer you to someone who can help discreetly. That night, he sent a name. Marcus Hale, private investigator, former police, trustworthy. I saved the contact and stared at the name for a long time. The word trustworthy felt foreign now. The next day, I met Marcus at a small cafe near the river. He was tall, quiet, the kind of man who spoke only when necessary. He slid a notepad across the table. Tell me what you need. I need the truth, I said, and I need it to stand in court if it comes to that. He nodded once. Truth has a habit of showing up when people think they've hidden it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange kind of relief. Not joy, not anger, just clarity. Back at the house, the days moved slower. I went through my old files, found bank statements, copies of transfers, anything that connected to Brian's name. The more I found, the more I saw how much I had overlooked, how he had built this careful illusion of responsibility while quietly siphoning away trust. One evening, Lily came into the kitchen while I was sorting papers. She hesitated before speaking. Grandma, are you mad at Dad? I looked up at her. I'm disappointed, I said softly. But disappointment is just love's shadow. It shows where light used to be. She didn't quite understand, but she smiled anyway. I told her to focus on her art, to draw what she felt, not what others wanted her to see. She promised she would. Later that night, I sat by the window again. The kettle whistled. The rosemary plant swayed against the glass. I wrote in my notebook, some betrayals don't scream. They whisper through the people you raised. I picked up my phone and sent Reed a single message. It's worse than I thought. I'm ready. He replied within minutes. Good. Then it's time to stop reacting and start preparing. Outside, the streetlights flickered. The air felt heavy but clear, like a sky before rain. I thought about what came next, the quiet steps between realization and action. I wasn't ready to strike back, not yet. I was still learning how to see clearly after years of looking through love's fog. Before going to bed, I checked on Lily. She was asleep, her sketchbook open on her chest. I turned the page carefully. She had drawn a woman sitting by a window, holding a plant in her hands. Above it, she had written 2 words in pencil, still growing. I closed the book and whispered, Yes, we are. In the dark, I felt something new settling inside me. Not revenge, not rage, but direction. For the first time, I knew exactly what kind of story I was in, and I was no longer the side character waiting to be rescued. A week after I hired Marcus, the truth began arriving in quiet envelopes and coded texts. He sent me images first, bank withdrawals, restaurant slips, jewelry receipts, and cash transfers. The totals lined up too neatly. $38,600, drained from the account I once shared with Brian. The descriptions were vague: consulting, travel, expenses. But the timing matched every trip they claimed was for business. I printed each one carefully and placed them in a folder marked with a single word: proof. Marcus came by one afternoon when the twins were at school. He spread the papers on my dining table like a map of choices. "These dates match your son's withdrawals," he said, tapping the columns. "And look here. Each large expense happens the same week Claire posted photos from Miami, Charleston, New Orleans. You can cross-check the timestamps." I stared at the glossy photos. Claire's smile, wide and bright, her wrist flashing that silver bracelet, the same one from the receipt, a boutique jeweler, $900, charged on my card. My breath hitched, but my voice stayed steady. "Keep going," I said. Marcus nodded. "One more thing. Brian moved $12,000 into a side account under a consulting name that doesn't exist." I checked. "It's a shell." I traced the printed line with my finger, each number a betrayal. "I trusted him with everything after Jacob died," I whispered. "He said he wanted to take care of me." Marcus didn't look away. "He took advantage of that trust. But now you have the evidence." When he left, I gathered the papers, hole-punched them neatly, and slid them into a binder. The act felt ceremonial, turning chaos into order. I brewed tea, the kettle hissing softly. As I poured, I heard the sound of tires in the driveway. My heart stopped. Brian was home early. I snapped the binder shut and looked around the kitchen. There was nowhere to hide it except in plain sight. I slipped it into a decorative tea tin on the counter, the one painted with tiny blue flowers. I wiped my hands, forcing them not to shake. He walked in, tie loosened, face relaxed. "Hey, Mom, you're up early." "It's afternoon," I said, smiling faintly. "I was just sorting recipes." He leaned against the counter, eyes scanning the table. "You okay? You look pale." "Just tired," I replied, steadying my voice. "Too much tea, maybe." He laughed. "You worry too much. I've got a meeting later, but Claire's taking the kids to practice. Don't stress about dinner, okay?" "Of course," I said. "Family means helping." He grinned, that same smirk from the dinner weeks ago. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. I met his eyes until he turned toward the door. "You're the best, Mom," he said lightly, walking out. The door clicked shut behind him. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence fill the space he left. My knees weakened, not from fear, but from the weight of realization. How close I had been to being caught. How close I still was to losing everything. When Marcus texted later, I told him what happened. He replied instantly, "He's getting careless. That helps us." That night, I placed the binder inside an old sewing box in my closet. I could almost hear Jacob's voice teasing, "You always did hide things in plain sight." I smiled faintly. "Some habits save lives," I murmured. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I made coffee and looked through the window. Claire's car was gone again. The twins' backpacks sat by the door. Lily was already up, sketching at the table. I joined her quietly. "Grandma," she said without looking up, "why do you keep those papers?" "They remind me that truth likes to be seen," I said. "Even when people try to bury it." She smiled faintly, shading the corner of her drawing. "Mom and Dad said we might go to Charleston next week." I nodded. "That sounds nice. You deserve a trip." After she went to school, I called Reed. "We have receipts," I told him. He sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from seeing this too many times. Addie, you're handling this with more grace than most. Keep documenting. When the time comes, the evidence will speak louder than anger ever could. I looked at the rosemary plant by the window. Its leaves had grown thicker, greener. I thought of what Lily said about it breathing. I touched one branch and whispered, "Keep breathing for me." By evening, I was back in the kitchen, reheating soup when Brian returned. He looked restless, distracted. "Have you seen my documents, Mom? The ones from the bank?" My pulse jumped. "No, I haven't touched anything," I said, keeping my voice level. "Did you leave them in the office?" He frowned, muttered something about misplaced folders, and left again. When his car pulled away, I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I opened the tea tin and looked at the binder inside. Safe, untouched, the proof of who I'd raised, and what I would no longer allow. Before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook, "Some lies are hidden in numbers, but numbers don't lie back." Marcus once told me that the ugliest truths often arrive sounding like business. He was right. One evening, he handed me a small flash drive. "Listen to this," he said. "It's not pleasant." I waited until everyone was asleep before I plugged it into my laptop. The recording began with Derek Pierce's voice, deep and deliberate. "Claire, you have to maintain appearances," he said. "Your husband already embarrassed the family with that failed startup. Keep your mother-in-law under control, or you'll both look like fools. People talk, you know that." Claire's reply was softer, trembling. "She's not hurting anyone, Dad. She trusts him." Derek cut her off. "Exactly. That's leverage. Keep her busy with the kids. Make her feel useful. Do it for your image, for God's sake." I stopped the recording. My throat tightened. I had suspected Claire's silence was fear, but I hadn't realized who she was afraid of. Derek's voice oozed authority, the kind that hides behind luxury and power. I replayed the last line again, listening to the sound of her defeated sigh. It wasn't greed that tied her to the scheme. It was pride. Someone else's pride, handed down like a burden. The next morning, Marcus dropped by with a printed transcript. "There's more," he said. "Your son's in deeper than you thought. He owes nearly $20,000 in gambling debt. Some of the transfers we tracked weren't for bills, they were payoffs. He's been trying to keep Derek's approval while hiding his own mess." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers. Every line, every number felt like a bruise. "So this isn't just about money," I said. "It's about control." Marcus nodded. "People like Derek use shame as currency. Your son's been buying his approval for years." Claire's caught in the middle. "Will it hold up legally?" "Yes," he said. "And ethically, it's clear. But I know you're not just after punishment." "No," I whispered. "I'm after peace." That afternoon, I watched Claire from the window as she loaded groceries into her car. She looked tired, her smile faint, her movements too rehearsed. When she saw me, she waved half-heartedly. I waved back, wondering if she realized I knew. Later, Lily came into the kitchen holding her sketchbook. "Mom and Dad are arguing again," she said quietly. "I heard Grandpa Derek's name. Mom said she's done pretending." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes pretending is a cage," I said. "And the first key is truth." She nodded, though she didn't fully understand. But I saw it in her eyes. She was starting to see through the same illusions I once mistook for love. That evening, after the children went to bed, I found Claire alone in the living room, scrolling on her phone. The glow from the screen made her look pale. You okay? I asked softly. She flinched slightly, then smiled. Just tired. Too many clients, too much noise. I sat across from her. Noise can be useful, I said. It hides the things we're ashamed to say out loud. Her smile faded. She stared at the screen. You know, don't you? I didn't answer. Silence is sometimes kinder than confession. She exhaled, a small, shaky breath. He told me to do it, she murmured. My father. He said if I didn't, he'd cut us off completely. I thought Brian could fix it all before you found out. But everything's just collapsing. Her voice broke. She looked like a woman trying to hold up walls made of glass. I never wanted to hurt you, Addie. I know, I said gently. But sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones too afraid to stand on their own. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. He's your son. I can't imagine how you must feel. I feel sad, I said. Not because he failed, but because he forgot who taught him to get back up. She lowered her head. What are you going to do? I'm going to protect my grandchildren, I said simply. And I'm going to do it the right way. She didn't stop me. She didn't defend herself. That silence was an answer. When she went upstairs, I sat there in the dim light, the kettle humming on the stove. The sound reminded me of those early years with Jacob, when we had nothing but each other and a small cottage full of laughter. We built our lives slowly, honestly. And now, watching everything unravel, I understood why he valued integrity more than comfort. Marcus called that night. I've compiled everything into a secure file, he said. If you're ready, we can set the next step in motion. I'm ready, I replied. But we'll move quietly. After hanging up, I poured myself tea and opened my notebook. I wrote one line beneath the others. When pride writes the story, love becomes an afterthought. I closed the book, looked toward the staircase, and listened to the faint sound of Claire crying behind her door. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, the kind that comes before a storm, not to destroy, but to wash things clean. I turned off the lights and whispered into the dark. Tomorrow, we start again. The morning they tried to make me sign, the air was unnaturally still. The sky hung heavy with clouds that refused to break, and even the twins were quiet. I had known this moment was coming ever since I found those messages in Lily's phone. I just didn't expect it to arrive wrapped in politeness. Brian called it a family meeting. He set out coffee cups, spoke in a practiced calm, and smiled like a salesman. Claire sat beside him, her fingers tapping against the folder on the table. Inside it, I knew, were the papers that would give them control over everything I had left. They called it power of attorney. To me, it sounded like surrender. Mom, Brian began, we've been thinking. You're handling so many things, and it's a lot of responsibility. We just want to make sure you're protected, that everything's managed correctly in case, well, something happens. Something happens. I repeated those words in my mind. They were the same ones he used when convincing me to sell my cottage. I smiled slightly, keeping my tone light. You're very thoughtful, Brian. Maybe I should read it first, just to be sure I understand. Claire chimed in quickly. Of course, but it's standard paperwork. Derek's attorney helped draft it. That name again. Derek. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to study the document. Inside, my pulse stayed steady. I had rehearsed this moment with Reed and Marcus the night before. I had already placed a small recorder inside the vase of dried lavender on the shelf. Every word now mattered. Brian slid the papers toward me, pen uncapped, voice gentle. All you need is your signature. It just makes things simpler for everyone. I traced the edge of the paper with one finger, pretending to read. You really think I need this? It's just for peace of mind, he said. You've been stressed, managing all these accounts. I looked up at him, calm but unblinking. And who's been causing that stress? His smile faltered for a second. Then he laughed awkwardly. Mom, come on. Don't be dramatic. We're trying to help. Claire reached forward, her hand grazing the folder. Addie, this is the best way to keep everything organized. We're family. Family, I repeated softly. The same word he'd used at dinner. The word that had changed everything. I picked up the pen, clicked it once, twice. The sound echoed. Then I set it down. You're right, I said. But I don't sign anything I don't understand. I'll have my attorney look over it. Brian's expression tightened. Your attorney? Reed Hollis, I said calmly. Jacob's old friend, remember him? Silence. Claire looked down at her lap. Brian's jaw flexed. You don't need to make this complicated. I'm not, I replied. I'm making it clear. The room shifted. Something fragile broke in his voice when he spoke again. Mom, you don't trust me? I trust what's written on paper, I said. And this paper doesn't sound like love. He stood abruptly, pacing a few steps. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. But it'll be my mistake to make. For a moment, I thought he might shout, but Claire touched his arm. Brian, she whispered. Leave it. He turned to her sharply. We had it handled. Why did you... He stopped himself when he caught my expression. I wasn't angry. I was just watching. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything. Fine, he muttered, grabbing his jacket. Do whatever you want. When the door slammed behind them, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. My hands were steady as I reached into the vase and switched off the recorder. The small red light blinked twice before dying. Marcus arrived later that evening, and I handed him the device. Everything they said is on there, I told him. The coercion, the plan, the names. He nodded approvingly. This will hold up. Georgia's a one-party consent state. You did it perfectly. I looked out the window where the rosemary plant bent slightly in the breeze. I didn't want to trap them, I said. I just wanted to see how far they'd go. Reed called shortly after. Addie, he said, what you did was brave. Now we can secure everything legally. The accounts, the property, everything in your name stays yours. Thank you, I said. But make sure the kids are safe first. Already handled, he replied. I filed preliminary notices. If Brian tries to move funds again, the bank will alert us. When I hung up, the house was quiet except for the ticking clock. I sat there for a long time, thinking of Jacob. He would have been proud, but he also would have been sad that it had come to this. Later, I went upstairs and found Lily sitting on her bed, headphones on. I knocked softly. Can I come in? She pulled off her headphones and smiled faintly. Sure, Grandma. I sat beside her. Do you remember what I told you about strong things? That they grow back, she said. I nodded. Even when they're pruned. She leaned against me. Are you okay? I kissed her forehead. Better than before. When she fell asleep, I stood by her door and listened to the quiet breathing of a child who still believed the world could be kind. I whispered into the hallway. Someday, you'll understand. Then I went downstairs, poured myself tea, and watched the kettle steam. In that soft hiss, I heard something like freedom, the kind that doesn't need applause, only proof. The morning after the power of attorney meeting, the neighborhood felt unnervingly normal. The mail truck rattled by, sprinklers hissed across trimmed lawns, and Rosa Delgado waved from her porch as if the world hadn't shifted overnight. I waved back, carrying my grocery bag like armor. Rosa was kind, the sort of neighbor who baked pies for block parties and loved to gossip, but she also loved approval. I didn't yet know that craving would make her part of their play. A few days later, Claire stopped by Rosa's house while I was tending the rosemary by the fence. I heard their voices, Claire's cheerful, persuasive tone, Rosa's uncertain laugh. When I greeted them, Claire smiled too brightly. "Mom, Rosa's offered to help with something," she said. Rosa gave me a quick, nervous wave. "Just a little favor," Claire added. That evening, when Claire handed me a document to sign, I didn't even need to read it to know it wasn't meant for me. It was a community verification form, essentially a statement that I was happy living there, well cared for, and supported by my family. I looked at Claire's practiced expression, then at the blank signature line. "Who asked for this?" I said softly. "Oh, it's just for some local paperwork," she lied smoothly. "The family insurance renewal, maybe. Rosa already signed as a witness." "Of course she did," I murmured. I set the paper on the counter. "I'll review it later." That night, I called Marcus. "They're building a narrative," I told him. "A good daughter-in-law, a grateful mother. They'll need witnesses." He said, "Let them. It'll make the truth louder when it breaks." 2 days passed. I went about my routines, pretending not to notice the small glances between Rosa and Claire. But I saw guilt starting to grow in Rosa's eyes. She avoided me, her greetings shorter, her smiles thinner. On the 3rd day, she came to my door just before sunset, holding a pie tin and her breath. "Addie," she began, her voice trembling. "I need to tell you something." I invited her in. The smell of apple pie filled the room, sweet but heavy. She sat down, twisting her hands in her lap. "Claire asked me to sign that paper. Said it was just to confirm you were doing fine here. I didn't think anything of it." I stayed silent, letting her speak. But then she mentioned it again yesterday. She said it might help with future legal matters. I didn't like the sound of that. I shouldn't have signed anything without asking you." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Addie. I thought I was helping." I poured her tea, steady and slow. "Rosa, people who lie depend on good people doing small favors. Don't blame yourself." She shook her head. "I'll make it right. I'll tell anyone who asks the truth, that you've been nothing but kind, that they—" I placed my hand over hers. "Thank you. Just be honest when the time comes. That's all I need." When she left, I watched her walk back across the street, shoulders hunched but lighter. I knew what she would do next. Gossip travels fastest when it's wrapped in guilt. And that was exactly what I needed. The following week, I noticed subtle changes. The neighbors who once waved politely began stopping by for small talk. Someone mentioned Claire's posts online, how perfectly curated they looked, how staged the smiles seemed. "She sure loves that camera," one woman said. "It's like she's trying to convince herself." I simply smiled. Everyone needs a story that makes them feel safe. Later that afternoon, Rosa came over again, this time with purpose in her eyes. "I talked to a friend who knows someone at the local newspaper," she said. "They've been doing features on family caretakers. I told her about you, about how you helped raise those kids while Brian and Claire were always traveling." She wants to meet you. I looked at her for a long moment. You're certain? Yes, Rosa said firmly. People need to know what real family looks like. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the oak trees, I sat by the window and thought about facades, the way people build them, polish them, live inside them until they forget what truth feels like. Claire's perfect photos, Rosa's eager signature, Brian's hollow charm. All of it was a house of cards. And now the wind had started to move. Claire must have sensed it too. She confronted me later that week, her voice brittle. You've been talking to people, haven't you? I talk to whoever talks to me, I said gently. Why do you ask? Her eyes flashed with panic. You're trying to ruin us. No, I replied. You're doing that yourselves. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Then she straightened her shoulders. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you, I said quietly. You've mistaken my patience for blindness. She turned and left, slamming the door so hard that the rosemary by the window trembled. I looked at it and whispered, Hold steady. That night, Rosa texted me a photo of her signed statement. It was handwritten this time, addressed to Reed. In it, she admitted her mistake and confirmed that Claire had coached her to lie. She ended it with one simple line. I should have trusted Addie, not appearances. I folded the printed photo and slipped it into my cream envelope beside the screenshots and receipts. The envelope was thicker now, heavier, like the weight of truth gathering its strength. Before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook, people build walls with lies, but when one brick cracks, light doesn't stop, it floods in. 2 mornings after Rosa's confession, Reed called. His tone was calm, but beneath it I heard urgency. Addie, they reached out, he said. Brian's lawyer proposed a settlement. They want to avoid charges, especially the financial ones. But there's a deadline. Deadline? I asked, though I already knew the answer. 48 hours, he replied. 72, at most. It's a maneuver. They're trying to pressure you before we file the formal claims. I'll send the terms. Don't react, just read. The document arrived by email, neat and impersonal. Legal phrasing wrapped around empty promises. The offer sounded generous. Return of partial funds, mutual silence, family reconciliation. But buried near the end was a clause in small print. A property transfer that would quietly hand them access again once the dust settled. When Reed called back, his voice sharpened. Hidden clause. They're testing if you'll cave. We won't accept it. I sat at the kitchen table, reading each line twice. My tea went cold beside me. Outside, the twins laughed in the yard, their voices floating through the open window, innocent and oblivious. I thought about what justice should feel like and whether it always had to hurt. Lily came downstairs holding her phone. Grandma, she said softly, Dad wants to talk to you. About what? She hesitated. He says he's sorry. He says he wants to fix it. I took the phone from her. Go check on your brothers, I said gently. When she was gone, I pressed the phone to my ear. Mom, Brian's voice said, tentative but rehearsed. Can we talk? Just us? I'm listening, I said. I know you're angry. I made mistakes. But this doesn't have to become a war. We can end it quietly, sign the papers, move forward. I stared out the window, watching a leaf fall onto the rosemary plant. You mean forget, I said. No, I mean forgive, he said quickly. We're family. Don't let outsiders ruin that. His voice trembled on the last word. I could almost hear the desperation hiding under his charm. I didn't raise mine. Family isn't ruined by outsiders, Brian. It's ruined from within. There was silence, then the faint sound of him exhaling. If this goes to court, it'll destroy us. The kids, Claire, everyone will suffer. Then you should have thought of that before asking me to sign away my name. He tried again, softer now. I don't want to lose you, Mom. You already did, I said. The day you chose convenience over conscience. He didn't speak again. The line went dead. Marcus texted a few minutes later. Call recorded. Admissible. He didn't need to say more. That afternoon, Reed came by with a printed copy of the settlement offer. We'll respond in writing, he said. We'll demand full restitution, no contact, and a public acknowledgement. It's fair, legal, and final. What if he refuses? I asked. Then we proceed to prosecution. I nodded, but my chest felt heavy. Reed, what about the children? They don't deserve any of this. He sighed. No, they don't. But protecting them doesn't mean protecting him. Later, Lily found me sitting on the porch, the evening light soft around us. She sat beside me, her voice almost a whisper. Grandma, do you want Dad to go to jail? The question pierced deeper than any document could. I took her hand, feeling how small and warm it was. I want him to learn what respect means, I said. And sometimes lessons come from loss. She looked down, then nodded slowly. Will we still be a family? Yes, I said. Just a different kind. When she went back inside, I stayed a while longer. The sun dipped low, turning the rosemary silver at its tips. I thought about mercy, how it isn't softness but discipline, choosing not to destroy when you have every right to. That night, Reed emailed me the finalized response. It was simple and sharp, written like a boundary drawn in ink. I approved it with one sentence: proceed as discussed. An hour later, Marcus called. We intercepted a private voicemail, he said. Brian contacted a friend at the bank, tried to delay the freeze on his accounts. We've logged it. He's panicking. Let him, I said. The truth doesn't rush. It waits. Before bed, I checked on the kids. Lily was reading, the twins asleep in a tangle of blankets. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way that felt almost undeserved. I went downstairs, poured a glass of water, and looked at my reflection in the kitchen window. Calm, controlled, not the woman who'd once flinched at her son's tone. I opened my notebook and wrote beneath yesterday's line, mercy is measured in patience, not pity. Outside, the porch light flickered, and a breeze rustled the rosemary leaves. Somewhere inside that whisper, I heard Jacob's voice again, steady and sure. You're doing just fine, Addie. I smiled. For the first time in years, I believed it. The meeting took place on a Thursday morning, gray and damp, the kind of weather that feels like it's holding its breath. Reed's office sat in an old brick building downtown, quiet but full of weight. Every inch of it smelled like paper and patience. I arrived early, carrying a cream envelope in my bag. It wasn't part of the legal documents. It was for me, a private gesture I had written the night before. When Brian and Claire entered, they looked smaller somehow, like the walls had pressed in on them. Claire wore a beige jacket that tried too hard to look professional. Brian wore his guilt beneath a forced smile. Mom, he said, his voice careful. Thank you for coming. We just want to end this peacefully. I nodded, saying nothing. Reed gestured for everyone to sit. The table between us was wide, polished, and merciless. He opened a folder and began reading the terms in that calm, measured tone of his. Mrs. Carter agrees to accept restitution in the amount of $38,600, full repayment within 7 days, acknowledgement of financial misconduct, and no further contact without legal counsel present. Brian's jaw tightened. That's excessive. It's fair, Reed said. You took from her accounts without permission. This is lenient, considering the evidence. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a check, sliding it across the table with trembling fingers. Here, she said quickly. This covers most of it. The rest will come next week. Reed glanced at it, then handed it to his assistant for verification. The room fell into silence, broken only by the ticking of a small clock on the shelf. I looked at Brian's face, the impatience flickering beneath the charm. He was still hoping charm would save him. It never did before. It wouldn't now. The assistant returned a few minutes later, whispering something to Reed. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked up. This check, he said slowly, has insufficient funds. It will bounce the moment it's processed. The color drained from Claire's face. Brian's smile cracked. That's impossible, he said quickly. It must be a mistake. Reed folded his hands. Then we'll contact the issuing bank to confirm. Brian started to protest, but I raised my hand gently. Don't, I said. My voice was quiet, but he stopped instantly. You know exactly what this is. Another performance. Another way to stall. He exhaled sharply, leaning back. You think I'm trying to cheat you again? I don't think, I said. I know. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Brian, please stop. He turned on her. You said there'd be enough. I said your father would cover it, she whispered. But he didn't. Reed interjected before the argument could grow. We'll include this attempt in the file. Forgery and financial misrepresentation are serious offenses, Mr. Carter. Brian slumped in his chair. You're really going to destroy your own son over money? I looked at him for a long moment. No, I said softly. I'm saving my dignity over truth. The silence that followed was long and raw. Reed closed the folder. This meeting is adjourned. The next steps will proceed formally. You'll receive the updated terms by end of day. As they gathered their things, Claire hesitated by the door. Addie, she said quietly, what's in the envelope you brought? I smiled faintly. Nothing that concerns this room. She nodded, eyes glistening, and followed Brian out. When they were gone, Reed looked at me. What's in it, really? A letter, I said. One that needed to be written before I came here. He didn't ask more, and I didn't explain. When I left the office, the sky had cleared. I drove home slowly, stopping by their house on the way. The front yard looked the same, neat, soulless, perfect. I walked up to the door, slid the cream envelope beneath it, and whispered a small goodbye. Inside that envelope were no threats, no numbers, no anger. Just one paragraph, written in my hand. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean return. You built this distance. I'm only choosing not to stand in it anymore. When I got back home, I found Lily painting on the porch. She was working on something new. A woman standing in the rain, holding a branch of rosemary. It's you, she said shyly when I approached. You look calm. I smiled. That's because I am. That night, Reed called to confirm what we already knew. The check was forged, he said. It gives us new leverage. Legally, it's over for them unless they cooperate fully. Thank you, I said quietly. I'll sleep well tonight. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Brian once declared I'd watch the kids for free. I traced the grain of the wood with my fingertips and felt the strange peace that follows exhaustion, the kind of peace you earn. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook again and wrote, "Peace doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives when you finally stop expecting it from the wrong people." Outside, the wind moved through the rosemary, soft and steady, like a promise kept. It began with a phone call, as most cruelties do. The house was quiet, the afternoon sun turning the curtains gold when my phone buzzed on the counter. I answered without checking the screen, expecting Reed or Marcus. Instead, it was Noah's small, hesitant voice. "Grandma?" he whispered. "Dad says you don't love us anymore." The cup slipped from my hand and hit the sink, not shattering, but cracking in the middle, just enough to break cleanly. I steadied my voice. "Who told you that, sweetheart?" "Dad said you're angry. He said you don't want to see us again." His voice wavered. "Did we do something bad?" My throat closed. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." He sniffled, the sound small and aching. "Can you come over tonight, please?" "I can't right now," I said gently. "But soon. And I need you to remember something very important. I love you enough to tell you the truth." "What's the truth?" "That sometimes grown-ups lie when they're scared," I whispered. "And sometimes love sounds quiet, but it never disappears." He didn't answer right away, then a small sob. "I miss you. I miss you too," I said. And when the line went silent, I let the tears fall where he couldn't hear them. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again, this time a message from Marcus. "Addie, we have the recording. He's using the kids to manipulate you. Keep every call logged. We'll compile them as harassment evidence." I didn't reply. I just looked at the cracked cup in the sink and thought about how love can fracture but still hold its shape. That evening, Claire brought the twins over. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her tone rehearsed. "They miss you," she said, trying to sound casual. "Brian thought it might help if you spent time with them." I looked at her carefully. Did he think guilt would work better than kindness? Her lips trembled. "He's scared, Addie. He doesn't know what to do." "Scared people don't weaponize children," I said quietly. The twins ran to me, wrapping their small arms around my waist. I knelt, hugging them tight. "Grandma's here," I whispered. "Always." Noah looked up, confused. "Then why did Dad say—" I pressed my finger gently to his lips. "Because sometimes people say things they wish they could take back." Claire turned away, wiping her eyes. I could see the guilt wearing her down, thread by thread. She was trapped between two wrongs, one she married and one she helped create. After they left, I called Reed. He answered on the first ring. "I heard," he said. "Marcus sent the file." "How bad is it?" "Worse than we thought. He recorded himself, Addie. The manipulation is clear. He coached the kids before the call." My chest tightened. "He's crossed a line." "Yes," Reed said. "And we'll use it. But I'll let you decide how hard we press. Legally, we could push for restraining measures." I looked toward the living room, where the kids' laughter still echoed faintly in the air. "Not yet," I said. "He's their father. I won't make them pay for his lessons." "That's your call," Reed said. "But remember, mercy is only safe when it's protected." That night, Lily came into my room. She stood at the doorway, holding her sketchbook. "Dad's been calling me too," she said softly. He says you're turning everyone against him." "And what do you think?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think he's scared. And when people are scared, they lie." I nodded. "You're smarter than you realize." She showed me a new drawing, a heart made of paper, stitched together by threads of gold. "It's for you," she said. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "That's what healing looks like." The next day, Marcus visited with new evidence: texts, timestamps, copies of phone logs. He showed me one message from Brian to Claire. "Make her feel guilty. She'll cave." "Guilt," Marcus said, "is their last weapon." I folded my arms. "Then I'll take it away." That afternoon, I met Rosa at the school gates. She had already spoken to the counselor about what was happening. "They'll keep an eye on the twins," she said. "And Lily, too." I told them the truth. "Thank you," I said, touched. "You've done more than you know." Walking back to my car, I saw Claire waiting by the parking lot. Her face looked pale, exhausted. "He's losing control," she said quietly. "I can't stop him anymore." "Then stop covering for him," I said. "That's all you can do." Her eyes filled again. "You don't understand. My father—" "I understand," I said. "But fear isn't an excuse forever." That night, after everyone slept, I sat alone in the kitchen. The kettle whistled softly, the sound gentle, steady. I poured tea into a new cup, uncracked and clear. The rosemary plant swayed on the windowsill, the leaves catching moonlight. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Love is strongest when it refuses to be used. Guilt can't control what grace has already forgiven." I closed it, feeling both heavy and light. Somewhere deep inside, the war was ending, even if the battle wasn't. The first invitation came on soft white paper with gold lettering. Lily had left it on my breakfast table before heading to school. "Invisible Hands. Student Art Exhibition, Saturday 6 p.m. Beneath the title, in her small, careful handwriting, she'd written, "Please come, Grandma. It's important." I ran my fingers over the words, feeling pride and sadness braided together. She had been painting more lately, quietly, intensely. I knew art had become her language for the things she couldn't say out loud. When Saturday arrived, the gallery was filled with warm light and the smell of fresh paint. Students buzzed around nervously, clutching sketchbooks and families. I stood near the entrance, my palms pressed together, waiting. Lily found me through the crowd and ran into my arms. "You came," she whispered. "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't miss your truth." Her lips curled into a smile. "You'll see." When the exhibition began, soft music played in the background, an instrumental version of something tender and familiar. The walls were lined with paintings in muted blues and soft golds. I moved slowly, reading each small plaque beneath her name. Then I saw it. Invisible Hands. The painting showed a woman sitting at a table, her face half in shadow. Around her, invisible shapes, outlined by faint brushstrokes, seemed to reach toward her. One offering a pen, another taking money, another pushing papers across a desk. But the woman's eyes were steady, calm. In her lap rested a sprig of rosemary, painted so vividly I could almost smell it. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and I realized she had painted my story. Not the details, but the feeling of it, the weight of unseen control, the quiet defiance of stillness. Behind me, people murmured softly. "It's haunting," one said. "So much emotion in the brushwork." Another whispered, "She must have lived something heavy to paint that." Lily joined me, looking at the painting. "Do you like it?" I swallowed hard. I love it. She smiled faintly. It's about people who help without being seen. The ones who hold things together but never get thanked. I touched her shoulder gently. It's about strength, too. The kind that doesn't need an audience. As the evening went on, more visitors stopped by her display. A local reporter took photos, jotting down notes. I overheard her speaking to Lily, asking about her inspiration. Lily answered carefully, glancing toward me. It's about my grandmother, she said. She's the reason I know what real love looks like. My eyes burned, but I kept smiling. I didn't want to take away her moment. Later, the reporter approached me. Mrs. Carter, would you mind sharing a few words for our feature? Your granddaughter's piece is the highlight tonight. I hesitated. I'm not sure I have words that match her colors, I said quietly. But tell them this. Some hands may be invisible, but they leave fingerprints on everything good that survives. She smiled. That's beautiful. By the end of the evening, the article was already being shared online. The headline read, Teens Painting Invisible Hands Captures the Quiet Strength of Caregivers. I saw the comments, hundreds of them, each one a small ripple of empathy. Across town, the ripples reached the wrong ears too. Derek Pierce, who had always prided himself on control, called Claire in fury. Marcus confirmed it later. Your painting rattled him, he said. People are starting to talk. Reporters are asking questions about his company's funding. I sighed. The truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs an echo. That night, Lily showed me a message from her teacher, Tanya Bryn, praising her work. She said people cried during the exhibit, Lily said shyly. Is that bad? I smiled. No, sweetheart. Sometimes tears are how hearts open. Before bed, I walked out to the porch, carrying the article printout. The night air was cool, heavy with jasmine. I thought about the journey, how every quiet act of defense had become something larger than revenge. It was turning into renewal, not just for me, but for her. Rosa called to tell me how proud everyone was. You should have seen the community board, Addie, she said. Everyone's talking about your granddaughter, about you too. People are starting to see what really happened. Good, I said softly. Truth grows best in the open. When I hung up, I looked at Lily's painting again on my phone screen. The invisible hands, the calm woman, the rosemary. I could almost hear Jacob's voice saying, You see? She got your strength. I whispered into the quiet. No, she built her own. Then I sat at my desk and wrote in my notebook. When one generation finds its voice, the next learns how to sing. I left the window open that night, letting the wind carry the scent of rosemary inside. Somewhere between memory and peace, I felt the first breath of something lighter, vindication without cruelty, justice without noise. The council chamber smelled of polished wood and nerves. I hadn't planned to attend at first, but Reed insisted. You deserve to see truth wear its own face, he said. So I sat in the second row, quiet among the murmurs of townspeople and reporters. The name Pierce floated through the air like static, familiar, untouchable, until now. At the front, Derek Pierce stood in his tailored suit, his expression smooth, eyes cool behind wire-rimmed glasses. To anyone else, he looked composed. To me, he looked cornered. He adjusted his tie when Reed and Marcus entered, carrying folders that could end the illusion he'd built for decades. Reed opened calmly. We're here to address public funding irregularities involving Pierce Renovation, LLC, and the misappropriation of private assets connected to Mrs. Adelaide Carter. His voice didn't rise, but every word landed like a gavel. The documentation has been verified through bank records, transfers, and notarized witness accounts. The crowd shifted. Derek smiled, the kind of smile people wear when they still think they're winning. "This is a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "My company has always conducted itself transparently." Marcus stepped forward, clicking the projector remote. A screen lit up behind them. Rows of transactions appeared, connecting Addie Carter's account to Brian Carter, then to Pierce Renovation LLC, and finally, to D. Pierce Construction Holdings. The line of deceit was perfect, clean, impossible to explain away. The room fell silent. Reed's voice carried steady as a tide. Each of these transfers occurred within 48 hours of false statements made to Mrs. Carter regarding investment and family management. The funds were funneled through intermediaries tied to Mr. Pierce's company. We also have recorded admissions from participants acknowledging coercion. Derek straightened his shoulders. "You can't prove intent." Then a new voice echoed from the back of the room. "Maybe not intent, but I can confirm knowledge." Every head turned. Diane Pierce, Derek's sister, stepped forward, holding a thin folder. Her face was pale but resolute. "I warned you, Derek," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "You can't keep hiding behind family names. I kept records. I've seen the emails, the instructions you sent to Claire." She set the folder on the table. "Here, proof." The council chair leaned forward, scanning the first page. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Derek's mask cracked then, just a flicker, but it was enough. "You'd betray your own blood?" he hissed. Diane's reply was steady. "Blood doesn't mean loyalty when it's poisoned." Reed didn't gloat. He simply turned to the chair. "You have all you need. The ethical board will begin proceedings." The questions came fast after that. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing, the crowd buzzing with a mix of shock and satisfaction. Through it all, Derek tried to maintain composure, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. His reputation, built on image, charm, and fear, was unraveling under fluorescent lights. Claire sat near the aisle, eyes glassy, watching her father's empire dissolve. When she finally looked my way, I didn't see hatred or defense anymore, just exhaustion. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded once. Outside, the evening air was cooler, cleaner. Reporters gathered near the steps, their voices blending into one long hum of questions. I didn't stop to answer any. Rosa and Lily waited by the car, their faces anxious until they saw me. "It's over," I told them softly. "Really over?" Lily asked. "Over enough," I said. On the ride home, Lily scrolled through her phone. "Grandma, look." She turned the screen toward me. The article headline read, "Local business leader under investigation following community allegations." Below it, a photo captured Derek's stunned face mid-denial. In the background, faint but clear, my rosemary-colored scarf was visible among the crowd. I hadn't realized the photographer caught me there, silent witness to my own justice. Rosa smiled. "The town needed to see this. Everyone did." "I didn't do it for them," I said quietly. "But I'm glad they saw what silence can build when it finally speaks." That night, I sat on the porch long after everyone went to bed. The streetlights glowed softly across the yard, the rosemary swaying with the faintest wind. I could almost feel Jacob's presence in the quiet. For months, I had fought battles no one saw. Now, with the truth standing on its own, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. The anger that had once buzzed under my skin was gone, replaced by something softer. I took my notebook and wrote, "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands in a public room, hand steady, voice calm, while lies fall apart on their own. I closed the notebook, set it beside my cup, and whispered into the night, "It's done, love. We're free now." The stars above Savannah flickered through the drifting clouds, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone my silence. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and paper, that strange blend of exhaustion and order. Reed met me at the steps, his expression calm, measured. "The prosecutor's ready," he said. "They're offering two paths, full trial or conditional settlement." I nodded, my hands folded neatly around my purse. "I've already made my choice." Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Brian sat at the defendant's table, his once confident posture now hollowed out. Claire sat beside him, eyes red, her hands clasped so tightly they trembled. Across from them, the prosecutor, a woman with steady eyes, reviewed the evidence one last time. The recordings, the forged check, the transfers, Derek's correspondence. It was all there, each piece sharp as glass. When proceedings began, Reed stood and spoke with quiet precision. "Your Honor, Mrs. Carter has chosen not to pursue incarceration. She seeks restitution, public acknowledgement, and an agreement of no contact. In short, she seeks closure without destruction." The room murmured. Even the prosecutor glanced at me. "Are you sure, Mrs. Carter?" she asked it. "You have a strong case for full conviction." "I'm sure," I said, rising to my feet. "He's still my son. I want him to face what he's done. But I won't let my grandchildren grow up visiting a prison." Brian looked up then, eyes glistening. I didn't return his gaze. I kept mine fixed on the judge, whose pen hovered over the file. "Very well," the judge said. "Conditional settlement terms will apply pending public admission and restitution in full." Reed handed the official statement across the table. Brian's hands shook as he read. He was to record a formal apology, surrender full control of any remaining funds, and sign a legal order restricting all contact without written consent. The last clause, authored by Reed, was simple. Violation voids settlement and reinstates prosecution. Claire leaned toward him, whispering, "Do it." He hesitated. She touched his arm again. "Please, Brian, do something right." He signed. The sound of the pen against paper was small but final. The prosecutor nodded to Reed. "We'll hold the restitution until full payment clears. Mrs. Carter's decision reflects admirable restraint." Reed smiled faintly. "Restraint isn't weakness. It's power practiced slowly." After the judge adjourned, Brian turned toward me. "Mom," he said softly, "I'll make this right." I held his eyes, not with anger, but with a kind of weary love. "Making it right starts with telling the truth," I said, "even when no one's watching." He swallowed hard. "I'll try." "Trying isn't enough anymore," I said gently. "Do it or don't, but remember who raised you." As we left the courtroom, Claire caught up with me in the hallway. "Addie," she said, her voice breaking. "They offered me immunity if I testified against Derek. I couldn't decide before, but now, I think I will." I looked at her carefully. "It's not about revenge anymore. It's about freedom. Take it." She nodded. "I'm sorry for everything. I thought protecting him meant protecting us." "Sometimes the best protection is distance," I said. "Go build something honest." Outside, the courthouse steps were flooded with afternoon light. Reporters waited, but I said nothing. Rosa met me halfway down the stairs, carrying a small bouquet of rosemary. "For peace," she said simply. I smiled. "It smells like forgiveness." Later that evening, I sat with Reed in his office to finalize the paperwork. "It's all over now," he said. "They'll record the apology tomorrow. You'll have it in writing." "Good," I said quietly. "Not for me, for the children. I want them to see accountability, not bitterness." He leaned back in his chair. "You've handled this with grace most people can't imagine." I smiled faintly. Grace isn't natural. It's learned in silence. When I got home, Lily was waiting at the kitchen table. "How did it go?" she asked. "It went as it should," I said. "He admitted it. That's all that matters." She hesitated. "Do you still love him?" "Yes," I said. "But love doesn't mean staying where you're hurt. It means knowing when to step away and still wish someone healing." That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight silver on the rosemary. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of life returning to normal. I took out my notebook and wrote, "Mercy isn't forgetting. It's remembering differently." I closed it, knowing that what remained wasn't victory but peace, the kind that grows when you finally stop trying to prove you were right and simply live as if you were. It happened on a Sunday morning, quiet and unassuming, the kind of day that carries no warning of emotion. Lily and I were walking through a small antique store downtown, searching for something to fill the empty corner of my new living room. The air smelled of old cedar and dusted memories. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just something that felt like peace. We moved slowly past shelves of glassware and faded postcards. Then I saw it. A watch. Its face was slightly scratched, its leather band worn smooth by time. It lay in a glass case beside a tray of pocket knives and silver charms. I almost kept walking, but something about it made my chest tighten. The engraving on the back read, "To A, from J, 1989. For a moment, the world tilted. My husband Jacob had given me a watch just like that the year he finished restoring our first house. I'd lost it years ago in a move, thought it gone forever. My fingers trembled as I asked the clerk to take it out. When it rested in my palm, I knew. The same tiny dent near the clasp. The same faint scratch where he'd dropped it once on the porch steps. I traced it with my thumb, and before I could stop myself, tears slipped free. "Grandma?" Lily's voice was gentle. "Are you okay?" I smiled through the blur. "I think the past just found me." We bought the watch. The clerk wrapped it in brown paper, unaware that he'd just handed me a lifetime. On the drive home, Lily chatted about her next painting, about school, about how light changes color in the evening. I listened, half in her world and half in Jacob's. When we got home, I went straight to my bedroom and sat by the window, the watch in my hands. The afternoon light glinted off its face, steady and patient. I turned the crown, hearing the faint click as it began to tick again. Life returning to something long still. Then I remembered his old voicemail, the one I'd kept on an ancient phone, tucked away in a drawer. I found it, plugged it in, and pressed play. His voice filled the room, warm and sure. "If they ever make you small," he said, "remember who you are. You're stronger than the noise around you. You always have been." I closed my eyes. The tears came quietly, not like grief, but like cleansing. Every weight I'd carried, anger, fear, disappointment, seemed to dissolve with each word. Lily knocked softly on the door. "Grandma, do you want me to make tea?" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "Something with rosemary, if you have it." She smiled. "Always." While she brewed it, I sat still, listening to the echo of his voice. I realized that all this time, I hadn't been fighting for revenge. I'd been fighting to remember who I was before I started doubting myself. When Lily brought in the tea, I asked her to sit beside me. "Do you know why rosemary is special?" She shook her head. "Because it smells nice?" I laughed softly. "Because it remembers. Even when it dries, its scent lingers. That's how love works when it's real." She nodded, holding my hand. "I think Grandpa would be proud of you." "I hope so," I whispered. "He taught me that kindness can be armor if you wear it long enough." We sat there together, the ticking watch filling the quiet. Outside, the sky shifted to gold. The world felt softer, somehow forgiven. Later that evening, when Lily went to bed, I placed the watch on my nightstand beside my notebook. The ticking reminded me of heartbeats, steady, unafraid. I opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote, "He thought time would make me forget. Time reminded me instead." Then I closed it, turned off the lamp, and lay back in the dim glow of twilight. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. I had already arrived where I was supposed to be. The past had circled back not to haunt me, but to hand me closure disguised as coincidence. The watch ticked on, marking seconds not of loss but of peace reclaimed. I whispered into the silence, "Thank you, Jacob. I remember." And somewhere in that small room in Savannah, it felt as if the air itself exhaled with me. Two lives intertwined again, one through memory, one through endurance. The first morning in my new condo began with quiet. Not the heavy, lonely kind that used to follow arguments or disappointment, but a clean silence, the kind that makes you realize you've survived. The walls were pale cream, the windows wide enough to let the early light pour in. On the small balcony outside my kitchen, a rosemary plant sat in a clay pot, already leaning toward the sun. I ran my fingers through its leaves, breathing in the scent. It smelled like fresh beginnings. I'd taken a job at a flower shop downtown, a modest place called Ariana's Blooms, owned by a woman whose kindness reminded me of what community used to mean. Ariana was 45, lively, always humming while trimming stems. "You have good hands," she told me one morning. "Careful, steady, that's rare." "I've had practice holding fragile things," I said, and she smiled as if she understood more than I'd said aloud. The rhythm of the shop became my healing. Mornings filled with the rustle of paper and the sharp scent of roses. I arranged lilies for anniversaries, daisies for apologies, and once, a bouquet of white orchids for a woman starting over. I tied the ribbon slowly, realizing I was sending her the same message I needed myself. Renewal doesn't ask permission. Lily visited often after school, sketchbook in hand. Her art had grown bolder, brighter. "Mom says you're working again," she said one afternoon, helping me sweep the floor. "Yes," I said. "It's good for me. Flowers don't lie." She grinned. "I told my art teacher you're like a gardener for people." I laughed. "That's generous, sweetheart." Her smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful quiet. "Dad started therapy," she said softly. "He texted me. He said he's trying." I paused, tying the last ribbon around a bouquet. "That's good," I said. "Trying is where healing begins, but we still get to choose what we grow around." "Will you text him back?" I met her eyes. "Maybe someday. Not yet." That night, when I came home, I found a small box at my door. Inside was a note from Rosa. "For your balcony." Beneath it, a packet of rosemary seeds and a small ceramic charm shaped like a heart. I smiled, touched by her quiet gesture. The community had rallied around me more than I realized. The women's group at church had started sending me messages, asking if I'd speak at their next meeting about finding strength after betrayal. I hadn't answered yet, but I thought I might. Over dinner, I turned on the local news. Derek Pierce's company was mentioned again. Under formal investigation, license suspended. Claire's name appeared in a small line near the bottom of the screen. Cooperating witness. I felt no triumph, just a long exhale. Justice had taken its course. My only prayer was that she and the children found peace on their own terms. The next morning, I wrote a letter to Reed, thanking him for standing beside me when I was too quiet to stand alone. I included a pressed sprig of rosemary between the pages. For patience, I wrote. Business at the shop picked up in early spring. One afternoon, Ariana found me arranging bouquets near the front window. A reporter called, she said with a mischievous grin. They want to do a feature, something about older women finding purpose again. I chuckled. Tell them purpose never left. I just had to make room for it. When I got home that evening, the sun was setting behind the river. I stood on my balcony, watering the rosemary, now growing strong and wild. Lily had painted a small wooden sign for me, Addie's Garden of Second Chances. I hung it by the railing. Below me, the city hummed softly, ordinary and alive. My phone buzzed with a message from Brian. I'm sorry, I'm in therapy now. I hope you're okay. I stared at it for a long time, then locked the screen. I didn't delete it. Forgiveness wasn't erasure, it was acknowledgement. He was trying. That was enough for now. As twilight settled, I brewed a cup of rosemary tea and carried it outside. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth. Across the street, Rosa waved from her porch and I waved back. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the cafe near the square. Life, stubborn and beautiful, moving forward. I opened my notebook, the same one that had once held pain and evidence, and turned to a fresh page. I wrote, Peace is not a place you find. It's a home you build after the storm. Then I set down the pen, closed the book, and looked toward the horizon. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or cautious. I felt steady. I felt seen. The rosemary brushed against my hand in the wind, and I whispered to it, Grow, even when no one's watching. The plant swayed as if it heard me. Maybe it did. Maybe it always had. Next, segment 16. My name is Adelaide Carter. I am 65 years old, and this is what peace finally sounds like. It isn't grand or loud. It's the rustle of rosemary against the balcony rail. It's the creak of a clean floor beneath bare feet. It's the steady hum of a woman who stopped apologizing for surviving. Every morning, I brew tea, open the window, and watch the light slide across the table. The same table where my son once told me, You'll watch the kids for free. That's what family means. I remember the silence that followed, how it filled the room thicker than shame. I smiled that night, not because I agreed, but because I had already decided what I would do next. The next morning, I went to the bank and removed his name from my account. I remember the pen gliding across the paper, my signature neat and final. The clerk looked at me kindly and said, Are you sure, Mrs. Carter? Yes, I told her. I'm just taking back what's mine. That moment didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like oxygen. The first deep breath after years of holding one too long. Now, months later, the account is mine again. My home is smaller, my circle quieter, but everything I keep has earned its place. The flowers at the shop, the neighbors who wave, the granddaughter whose art tells the truth better than words ever could. Even Brian's message on my phone. I keep it. I don't answer it, but I keep it. Some things are meant to remind us how far we've come. Sometimes, when I lock the shop at dusk, Ariana teases me about my secret smile. I just laugh. She doesn't know it's not a secret. It's the same smile I wore that night at dinner, the same one my son mistook for surrender. But it wasn't surrender. It was strategy. It was control disguised as calm. Because silence, when used right, is louder than anger. I come home, light a candle, and water the rosemary. Its scent fills the kitchen, clean, sharp, forgiving. On the counter sits a single cream envelope. I keep it there as a reminder of choices made without hatred. Inside is a copy of the letter I left under Brian's door that day. The words are simple. I forgive you, but I will never forget myself again. Sometimes Lily joins me on the balcony, her sketchbook resting on her knees. She's drawing a new piece, a garden blooming from cracked stone. It's about you, she says, about how things grow even after being broken. I tell her the truth. It's not about me, sweetheart. It's about all of us who ever had to rebuild quietly. She smiles, and for a long moment, we just sit there, listening to the soft sounds of the city. Distant laughter, a passing train, the clink of teacups from the neighbor's window. Ordinary life, steady and beautiful. Sometimes, when the evening breeze moves through the rosemary, I imagine Jacob's voice whispering like before. If they ever make you doubt yourself, remember who you are. I remember, I whisper back. Then I smile. The same smile that once masked my fear, but now holds only peace. People often think strength comes from shouting, from standing tall and fighting loud battles. But the truth is, strength is quieter than anyone expects. It's choosing dignity over drama. It's removing a name from a bank account and reclaiming the rest of your life. It's writing a letter you'll never send, because the act of writing it is enough. I glance at the envelope one last time, then at the plant reaching toward the fading light. Love, dignity, control, they all live here now, small but steady. If you've ever been made to feel small, if someone ever told you your worth was measured by what you give away, listen to me. You are allowed to stop giving. You are allowed to keep what's yours. And if you ever have to smile through someone's arrogance, let it be the kind of smile that means, I'm not losing, I'm learning. I take one last sip of tea, watching the sun slip beneath the horizon. The rosemary sways gently, and for a heartbeat, the world feels perfectly still. Because peace doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly, once you've earned it. So tell me, if it were you, what would you have done?